Nieves is a former NYPD detective and says do not...
Everybody's looking for the monkeys.
Yeah. So you
Our smiles, to give you a little bit of a brief.
And, well, I'm low on the screen. I got to adjust. I got to either move closer or sit up better.
There you go.
There I am. That's better. Now at least I'm kind of, I got a fighting chance beside you there, Angel. Welcome everybody to today's show. And we are going to talk about a rather famous and sometimes infamous park in Brooklyn called Prospect Park, which is huge. I mean, it spans, we're going to find out from our guest, Mary Beth Artz, how large that park is. But there are good things that happen in that park. There are bad things that can happen in that park. But one of the good things is we have Mary Beth Artz, who sees that the good things do happen in that park. And she's kind of the keeper of the animals and the flowers and the habitat in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. So Mary Beth, introduce yourself.
Hold on, let me play a little thing of her.
Okay.
We could get an idea.
We do it in a group, then they see that they can also do it.
One of the many Mary Beth and her teams of volunteers watch over and protect.
I don't know, but you cannot remove wildlife from any...
All right. So, Mary Beth, when I worked in news, I spent a lot of time in that park. I spent a lot of time when people were being fished out of the water. I spent a lot of time on the other side, taking some fabulous shots of these stunningly beautiful swans in that lake. I'm curious. So the people have an idea of how large that park is. The lake rather. In terms of acres, can you give us a concept? Can you tell us what we're dealing with?
The park itself is over 500 acres, maybe 585, 535. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it's over 585 acres. Yeah. And the lake is, there's different water courses within the lake, but the lake at its deepest point is probably 7 to 8 feet in the middle. And then there's little sections around the main lake. You've got the ravine and different areas of the lake that spill down into the main lake.
In terms of the history of that lake, how far back does that lake go, and what is the beginning of that lake being populated?
It's a man-made lake, so it's fed by the water from the city flows into it. But it's a man-made lake, and I'm guessing like back in the 1800s. I'm not sure of the exact year, but it's a man-made lake.
But in terms of, I think what I'm trying to ask is in terms of aquatic life, what was in there initially, and how was that lake cultivated over a period of time? In other words, was there a period where there were more fish than there were ducks? Was there a period where there were more geese? How did that lake evolve?
Well, it's if you build it, they will come. So I believe they had stocked the lake with fish. I don't know if they still do it or not. But New York City, we're on the Atlantic Flyway, and it's a major migration route. So the lake and the park itself is a very important stopover for millions of birds every year. And so the Atlantic Flyway is a very important spot. And Prospect Park Lake is one of the only open water areas other than Central Park, So especially in the winter, you need open water. Birds need open water. You'll see a lot of them fly in. If the lake is open and it's not frozen over, they will come. But it's a very important stopover for wildlife. Very important for many types of birds.
Is that lake self-sustaining, or does the population in general have to be balanced? In other words, you have a number of birds, you have a number of fish, you have a number of other amphibians. Is there a point where the balance of that lake needs some assistance?
Well, I don't work for the lake. I don't work for the park. I'm a wildlife rehabilitator and rescuer. So I spend my time over there, just watching out for the animals and the wildlife. But as far as the lake being cared for, there's a really great person named Marty who takes care of the water. They check the pH balance. Marty goes out on the weed harvester, which is called the goat, to clear out algae blooms and trash that ends up in the lake. So the lake needs to be maintained because of human activity, because of, high phosphorus levels, whatever. It has to be cared for, because with algae blooms and other issues, especially in the summertime when it gets too hot, they've got to watch out for the algae bloom. So yes, it is maintained. And as far as I know, I think the level goes up and down according to, if they get storms, they have to look at the level of the lake. And so they can control that. But as far as the park, I don't work for the park, so I can't really answer a lot of the lake questions and, specific. You'd have to get that from Prospect Park employees. But that's what I know, the basic. But I know how important that park is to wildlife.
But you just mentioned something important. You mentioned human activity, which sort of brings us to the focus of the show today. There's a lot of human activity in Prospect Park. Some of it's good and some of it's bad, and some of it is just horrendous. So there's been a lot of vandalism. I don't want to be negative. I want to concentrate on the positive, but I think that it's important for the audience to be aware that, this ain't Nirvana in Brooklyn, that, there are geese that are abused. There's a lot of action. And you as a wildlife rescuer are there to counteract that action. So tell us what things you see in that park and what you do.
Well, I think, there's a lot of things that happen everywhere. There's a lot of things that happen to wildlife. They get injured. They get injured because, there might be something in the water, or they get ill from diseases. Right now, we've got avian flu around the world. So avian flu is very prevalent with the wildlife, and especially with geese, ducks, carry it. So we watch out for that. But, the illnesses and the natural occurrences that happen to wildlife, we don't have control over that. But if someone is ill, lead poisoning, but that is, I would say, kind of human caused, because lead is in the water, in the groundwater, and many birds around New York City end up with lead poisoning. But if it's something like a natural occurrence, and we try to help them out. But when it comes to people being involved in issues with wildlife, it's really sad, because a lot of this can be prevented with education and better signage. So what we tend to do, and now that we're coming into the busy season, we're volunteers. I'm not a park employee. I'm a volunteer, and the people on my team, we help out, and we're all volunteers. But we see that there was a need to be extra eyes on the ground, especially with after the pandemic, the number of people going to the park, it spiked. So there were a lot more people using the park, which means a lot more trash, which means a lot more interaction with wildlife. And when you've got the human wildlife interaction, sometimes it's not good. And you're not in a really a wild environment. It's an urban park. You've got wildlife and you've got people. So you've got to balance it somehow. And it can be tricky. So we're out there, we look for injuries, we look for, there's so many things that people fishing when they're not picking up their fishing line and their hooks, the birds and the turtles and whoever else get injured, and even off-leash dogs. So you've got that issue. You've got people feeding wildlife everything from soup to nuts. We've seen people feeding them gummy bears. We've seen them feeding spaghetti, rice and beans. And the worst, well, it's all bad, but bread and hard bread. Sometimes it's really hard. They choke. And when you've got birds, especially like young birds that are just hatched, and you start them out eating bread, every age. So you've got a gosling that they have different nutritional requirements than their parents. You start out a gosling eating bread or a duckling, and then they just end up getting nutritional deficiencies, which causes many issues. One of them being angel wing, which renders them flightless. So we deal with things like that. People's trash, plastic everywhere, goes into the water. The new thing that we've seen is confetti everywhere. Confetti, people will have parties in the park or anywhere. Confetti gets all over the place. It gets into the water, gets into the ground, all over the ground. So any kind of human activity, when you've got humans and wildlife, you've got human-wildlife conflict that really needs to be resolved. And it needs to be resolved in the right way so that you're not alienating people and you're protecting the wildlife at the same time.
Angel, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to get this straight. I hope I'm right. You're also the founder of W.I.L.D.
I'm one of the founding members of Wild for Prospect Park, and we started that group. We're a community group back in 2011 after the USDA went in and killed 368 Canada geese in the park. And this was due to the plane that went down in the Hudson that year. So they said, okay, well, we're going to kill all the Canada geese within 12 miles of the airport. And Prospect Park, or 9 miles of the airport, and Prospect Park was like 11 or 12 miles out. But they went in the cover of darkness and killed 368 geese and their goslings when they could not fly. So they get them at the time when they're molting in July through June, July. And they went in and rounded them up and brought them to a mobile gassing chamber and killed them all. So after that, the community was up in arms, and we started this group, Wild for Prospect Park, so that we could maybe become, a partner or work with the park officials and reach out to the community as well. So we do cleanups around the lake. We talk to people. And then, so we've been doing that, but then we started a group called Swan Squad. After the swans, 2 years ago, our mother swan's mate was taken away from her by two people. This is what we hear. And most likely killed, and left her on the nest alone with her eggs. And she couldn't eat. She couldn't leave the nest. So Marty, who works at the park, brought some food and water out. We made sure she ate. And then once they hatched, we kept watch. And that's when our new group, Swan Squad, developed. And we're eyes for everything now. We just keep watch on everything.
What about the recent, and it's only, I want to say recent, but it really isn't recent because it's been going on for years, about dumping of exotic animals. They just pulled an alligator, a 4-foot alligator, no less, out of Prospect Park Lake, and there's that alligator. I mean, I'd like to see that around on your nightly stroll at 9 p.m. And there have been pythons, you name it. Matter of fact, you name it. Tell us what's out of that lake, and the threat not only to the public but also to the life in that lake in general.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's I think what it comes down to is people get overwhelmed. I don't think people maliciously want to dump their animals. I think people get in over their heads and what we see a lot of are domestic animals, in addition to wild, like that alligator, which is banned in New York State. But I do a lot of domestic duck rescue, and in a span of a month, starting in November of 2022 through December, we rescued almost, I think, 9 ducks. And I had 6 of them with me up until the beginning of February, because they had to be quarantined before they went to their new home. But we find ducks, we find chickens, we find roosters, we find guinea pigs, rabbits, what else? You name it.
Domestics.
What was that?
The old domestic.
They're all domestic animals. So what happened, and now we're seeing an uptick in dumping, because a lot of people, when they were home during the pandemic, they went out, they bought. We found an uptick in dumping of ducks because people would buy ducklings online, and you get them shipped to your local post office. These animals are being shipped in the mail. Many of them don't make the in transit. They just don't make it. They die. But during the pandemic, a lot of people went out and bought animals, impulsively buying them for their kids or whatever. And now we're seeing that a lot of them are being dumped now. People are back to work, they're back to school, they're not, working from home as much, they're not being homeschooled, and so people get overwhelmed and they dump them. And a lot of people don't realize that, especially with ducks, ducks aren't like the domestic ducks aren't like the mallard ducks or the wood ducks that you see in the lake. They can't fly. They're too heavy to fly. Their wings are too short. They can't escape predators. They can't find their own food. So a domestic animal is called domestic because over thousands of years, they've learned to live with humans, and they depend on humans for their survival. So if you took, I have my cat, Mr. Boo, sitting next to me, like I see your cat with you. If I took Mr. Boo and I put him, hey, Mr. Boo, let's just, I can't take care of you anymore. I'm just going to go bring you to the park. You'll find your own food. You wouldn't do that, but people do. Yeah. But you wouldn't do that. But instead, they'll take a duck or they'll take a rabbit because, there are wild rabbits. Well, domestic rabbits are not wild. You're literally giving them a death sentence. And I think what really needs to be done is people need to be educated on why you shouldn't do it. And also, there's help out there. If you're really that desperate, instead of taking that animal and putting them out in the wild where you're giving them a death sentence and you're also putting the existing populations of wildlife in danger, you're threatening their survival and possibly bringing in viruses and diseases that weren't there already. And people don't realize that. So again, you shouldn't have any wild animal as a pet. Wild animals are wild for a reason. Yeah. Domestic animals are domestic and they cannot live in the wild. So we need to do a better job of education. And like right now, we're trying to push through a ban on guinea pigs being sold in pet shops because of the dumping situation. And they're coming really, really close to signing the bill. And with just this week, we've had 3 guinea pigs dumped. And we're hoping that this will push it through a little bit more quickly.
Well, you see with the guinea pigs, I got a lot of stuff because we're just saying I experienced it. I had a little duck when I was a kid. And back in the days, the chickens used to be colors. They used to dye colors on these poor babies.
Terrible.
And then from there, I had a duck at Easter time. And this duck used to sleep in my slipper. Everywhere I go, the duck follows me. I throw the garbage out. The duck goes with me. Quack, 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 quack. It comes right back. And it's getting bigger and bigger. I don't remember. I know my mother gave it away to another neighbor because I don't know, she got jealous or something. This bird was like a kid.
It was imprinted on you.
Yes, like a twin, and then like my cousin, she had chickens on Easter, little chicks. They gave her like a dozen, and guess what? They got big, and they were flying all over the house. You know what I mean? But this is like old school days. You know what I mean? We don't know that. And people have to understand. And with the guinea pigs, I was in Petco, I think it was, or Petland, whatever, and they had guinea pigs. And I'm looking at it, and I know about the guinea pigs in South America. And I'm looking at it, says Do you sell a lot of guinea pigs? I said, yeah. It's a lot of people from South America. So I said, listen to me. These people from other countries that buys it is food,
Mhm.
delicacy.
Yeah.
And that's what they eat in the country. And that's what you guys selling like a food market. And she looked at me shocked. She's like, I don't believe this. But yes, it's true. And the thing with the crocodiles, alligators, over like 25 years ago, I used to do sports cards. So I had comic books and all that. And this guy wanted to trade a card. He had a bag, a mail bag, and he's moving. He put it right on top of the table with my cards there. Look, it had a plastic over it. And he let go an alligator. A 2-foot alligator. I'm looking at this. And I was a cop then, and I had my gun, but I didn't pull it out. I said, are you kidding me? Get this, get it out of here. He said, do you want it? I said, listen, I'm a cop. He said, oh my God. He took it, put it back in the bag. He ran. I said, no, I got warrants. This guy was wanted. But this is what happened to me. And this is why you see these animals, people do pick it up, put it in the bathtub, it gets too big, and then they don't think, they just throw it in the lake in New York and they die because they're cold blood.
Right. They can't survive. And that's another thing. It's like, people get these exotic animals. A lot of times I think like pythons and all that makes them feel good. Like I have this really cool exotic pet. And it's really not doing that animal any justice. And especially if you cannot take care of that animal, that's another thing. But an animal gets too big, the last thing you should do is dump it in the lake. And this poor alligator was dumped in a cold pond, a cold lake. And usually under 70 degrees, they will stop eating. And at 50 degrees, that's when they kind of go dormant. They'll brumate. But this poor animal was so emaciated and not in good shape at all. And now it's got that bathtub stopper in its belly.
Yeah.
They can't do any surgery yet because it's still too weak. That's what I hear.
But you found a bold instructor, something like that?
I found the python.
This guy.
The python. Now that one, I found that actually I was looking for a swan that was killed by people, and we know it because I found the blood and feathers. So as I was talking to some people that were actually living in the park in the spot where it happened, and they said, oh, a raccoon took it. It's over there. And I knew a raccoon wasn't going to grab a swan. And I looked around for anything white, but I said, there's no carcass anywhere. And then I saw this bag, and I saw a little piece of white coming out. I didn't know what it was. I thought, oh, maybe it's the swan that was missing. And it turned out to be a python. And it was about 7 foot, I think, by the time we pulled it out of the bag. And I don't know if it was already dead and dumped, or if someone put it in the bag and let it die in the water. We don't know. But again, an animal that got too big, somebody didn't want it, and dumped it.
You also did, I'm sorry, Arlena.
No, go ahead, Angel.
You also did a news thing about 2 or 3 ladies. They were poaching, stealing turtles from the lake.
That was a couple of years ago, I think back in 2017, and they were poaching. They took 27 turtles, and park employees stopped them. Thank goodness. So they were stopped, and they confiscated the turtles and put them back in the lake. But again, I think also there's a huge problem because now the park is comprised, the visitorship has changed. So you've got all these different cultures that are now visiting the park, bringing their own traditions with them. So you've got people that, would fish from whatever country using a bamboo pole, or, we find people making their own fishing poles. But in their own countries, in some of these countries, they will fish for sustenance. So they'll take the fish out. And so now what we're seeing, there's just so many different cultures with different traditions coming in. And a lot of them don't understand that you can't just take wildlife out of a New York City park. It's illegal. but there are no signs. So we're actually working with the park, hopefully getting signage in multiple languages so that people understand you cannot go in and take wildlife out of the park, nor can you bring your animals in and dump them.
I'd like to expand on that because I find that fascinating. Because New York City is a polyglot. You've got the whole world is represented in New York City. So, let's follow up on that trend. Are people fishing in Prospect Park for purposes of getting fish so that they could use the fish to eat? That's part one. Part two is getting fish so that they could then sell that fish. Are they profiting by selling that fish on the street? And the third part of the question is the fish population dwindling as a result of these people coming from various parts of the world fishing in Prospect Lake?
Well, people are allowed to fish at Prospect Park. It's catch and release only. And if you go on the park's website, you can get all the information. People are allowed to fish, but you're not allowed to use barbed hooks, and you cannot take the fish. So it's catch and release, which, doesn't make sense to me. The fish is already being destroyed at that point. So anybody that takes fish out of the lake, it's illegal. You're not allowed to do it. As far as the dwindling numbers, I don't know. You've got die-offs of fish all the time, everywhere, not just, here, like depending on the weather in the summertime or how hot it is, you'll get fish die-offs. But as far as dwindling because people are taking, I wouldn't know that. But people are allowed to fish, but they have to abide by the rules. And that means catch and release and no barbed hooks.
Well, what's to stop them? Is there any supervision in the park at night? Because it's one thing if during the daytime people can be stopped because you've got park rangers there, but then after the sun sets, what's to stop somebody from going in there at 2:00 in the morning and fishing until the sun comes up?
Right. Well, they have PEP park enforcement officers, so the PEP is out, I think, until 11 o'clock. But after that, there's nobody, and that's why we're really hoping for cameras after this alligator being dumped. And we've been trying to get cameras for a while, and I actually put it in for the participatory budget for my council person, and the participatory budget allows funding for different programs for the community, and people are allowed to voice their opinion. Hey, money would be good for this or that. And so after a lot of like the swans disappearing or people dumping animals, I said, you know what? Hey, maybe we can get some cameras around the lake. And we were initially told, oh, it's an invasion of privacy. So this doesn't make any sense because New York City is covered in cameras. And if you come into a public park with the intention of doing harm to a person or an animal, well, then all bets are off. Having cameras can actually help people that want to enjoy the park as well as protect wildlife.
Let me put my 2 cents in there because that's my category.
Right.
And number one is definitely need a sign on front and by the area of the lake. And also put a danger sign because you don't know what's thrown in there like an alligator. So, and also the cameras, yeah, you can put some cameras. You have to because God forbid somebody gets raped or shot or killed. You don't have no cameras. That's a big lawsuit. It's like a dead zone. That's number 2. So you spend a lot of money in insurance. And number 3 is you need somebody to stay in the midnights. At least 2 bodies to stay in the midnights. And you can have drones flying around at midnight. There's nobody there not supposed to be there. Flying drones around the area around midnight.
Drones are illegal to have in the park, so they probably wouldn't do that.
Well, security could have it.
But it's I think as far as, yeah.
And they could have it flying around on the midnight when it's closed. It is closed. So privacy is no privacy. You're not supposed to be there in the first place. You're trespassing.
No one, you can be there. You can be there, I think, until 1 or 2 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then from 1 to 5, it's closed. And then you can go back in at 5 in the morning.
Who wants to be there 2 in the morning?
People that want to do, I don't know, maybe there are people that want to take a a walk and actually like it, but you know, it's not a good time.
After 1 o'clock in the morning, you're looking for trouble or you're creating trouble in a park. It doesn't matter. I know that by experience.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a dumping that I want to show real quick, and it's with the eels. And this person, he didn't dump it because he had them as pets. He actually went to a store, brought 100 eels or more, and dumped it because he thinks he's saving the world.
Right.
Check this out.
Supposed to be dumping eels here, dude.
That's the voice of Dominic Pavone approaching a man he says was throwing eels into Prospect Park Lake Sunday night. He alerted the man.
That's not legal.
Saving a life.
No, you're not.
Saving life, they said.
You're killing other life in here.
No.
Pavone fishes.
Mm-hmm.
So people really think like the one in Central Park with the owl. I'm saving the owl's life. No, they can't catch this owl. This guy's huge. I'm sorry. He probably fly around looking like an angel because it's so huge. And people they dump it because they're saving life. They dump it because they want to get rid of it. And then you got people poaching, try to take it to sell. And then people buy those little turtles in Chinatown and they dump it in there too. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, as far as the jumping to save lives, that also happens with a lot of ducks, or actually many types of animals, because people truly believe, like, I'm going to set this animal free. I'm getting it out of a live market. So like with ducks, they'll often take them out of live markets thinking they're getting it out of a slaughterhouse, but not realizing that that animal can't survive out there. And those eels that were dumped were, I guess they were an Asian type of eel, and it was winter. So those eels probably died quickly. I don't know if anybody has seen any of them. There may have been one or two, but they probably died fairly quickly. And as far as the, you mentioned something else. Oh, I can't remember, but maybe I'll mention it again. But yeah, so and people truly believe that they're saving. You know, I've seen people do that in other areas where, you know, I'm giving it a life, but you're not giving it a life. You're giving it a death sentence because it doesn't know how to live out here. And you're also giving a death sentence to the other animals and wildlife in that area, you know, threatening their lives with disease or whatever.
Ardina?
What about swans? I mean, that was one of the most beautiful parts of the park in my fond memories of being there. You know, no matter how bad your day was going, you took one look at those swans and they were just so beautiful. And just, has there been theft of swans or people stealing them?
Well, we know we've been watching for quite a while. And we've heard from different people that frequent the park a lot. They've mentioned it. We know that the one swan, the male swan of the mate of our mom, when he disappeared, we know he wouldn't go away on his own because they mate for life. And a male swan, a cob, would never leave his mate sitting on a nest. It's unheard of. So we knew that something happened, and then we heard the stories of him being taken out. We also know that one of our younger swans, one of her offspring, in October of 2021, this swan went missing the night before Halloween. And we know he didn't fly off because at that point, he wasn't flying yet. So, and we've heard different stories and from different people that they've seen it, they've heard it. And I came upon piles of blood back in 2017 with swan feathers all over the place. And I did a count, and sure enough, one of our swans was missing. And, you know, there was a group of people sitting there, and it was in a place where it was covered with a lot of brush so they could easily hide. And it was right next to where these swans would sleep at night in the water. And we knew that she was gone. But there's no acknowledgement of that. So right now with Swan Squad, our group of 5 of us, we keep watch. And when people get too close, especially when they hand feed, people love to hand feed. It makes them feel good. They feel like they're connecting. But what they don't realize is that they're putting those animals in danger because they're making it easy for other people to harm them. So by making them fearless, having no fear of humans is the worst possible thing you could do for an animal that needs to stay wild. And so we're on it. Like our team was out there today. We watch. We're coming into breeding season, so things are heating up, and the alpha swan is chasing the younger ones out, which is a normal thing. And if we were in a place where it was just wilderness, I'd say, okay, they're chasing, and that's that. But when you have the people component, when they're being chased up on land and the people are all around trying to grab them and trying to touch them and they think it's a petting zoo, then it gets really hairy and everybody gets in danger. So they're beautiful swans. I love them. They're considered invasive. They were brought here in the 1700s as ornamental birds for rich people's properties, but they've been here for as long as we have. We're all invasive at some point, if you think about it. But people just need to respect the swans, especially they're big, they're fluffy, they're white, they're majestic and graceful. And people just immediately want to run down and touch them and feed them and think that they have to take care of them when they don't. And the best thing to do is to give them distance, especially right now. We're coming into the breeding season.
Well, with that, we're nearing the end of our show, but before Angel gets the last word, I'd like to ask you if you have a great organization, and there are probably people out there who say, I like what you do and I want to get involved. So how would they do that?
We have a Facebook page. It's called Wild for Prospect Park, and Swan Squad is the spinoff. And you'll see us out there. We have Swan Squad shirts, and we spend pretty much every waking minute when we're not working our regular jobs. We're out there watching, and we're just extra eyes for the rangers and for Marty, who works in the park. It's just good. And we get out and we talk to people and we tell them what's going on. So Wild for Prospect Park, we're on Facebook. You can always send us a message. We sometimes do cleanups, hopefully getting back into that because we couldn't do it during the pandemic. And just give us a shout out and we'll get back to you.
Great. Okay. Now that guy over there is going to have the last word. What do you have to say, Angel Nieves?
Well, Prospect Park has beautiful lake. It's a beautiful park. Good for family. Keep it that way. Pick up your own trash. Do not dump animals, and do not take them. They're not yours. Okay? It's against the law. You go to jail, and you lose a lot of money. And please, people, spay and neuter your pets. And do you know where your pets are?
And with that, good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. See you on the next show. Thank you, Mary Beth Artz, for educating us and continuing to educate the public about what they need to do and their obligation to Prospect Park in Brooklyn. All right, buddy, take us out.